I never imagined standing in front of my daughter with the power to destroy her marriage. I never planned for this moment, watching the color drain from Chad's face as he realized who owned the building he lived in, who controlled the roof over his head, the floors beneath his feet. You, his voice cracked, betraying the panic beneath his arrogance. This is a joke. What kind of game is this? The conference room fell silent. Every tenant stared, sensing the electricity in the air. Chad's hands trembled as he gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white, the veneer of control slipping away. Amanda sat frozen, her eyes wide with shock, tears threatening to spill. I smiled, not the timid smile of the mother they had discarded months before, but the confident smile of a woman who had reclaimed her power. "No game," I said softly. "Just business. How did I get here? How did I transform from a grieving widow sleeping in a cheap motel to the owner of this apartment complex?" The journey began with 2 suitcases and a broken heart on a cold night when my own daughter chose her husband over her mother. I was 58 years old when my world collapsed for the second time. The first collapse came when cancer took my husband last year. For decades, we had built a life together in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Our modest home represented years of sacrifice, saving, and love. Every corner held memories of birthdays, Christmases, and quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and crosswords. When he died, the silence became unbearable. I would wake at night, certain I'd heard his voice calling from the kitchen. I'd prepare 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then stare at the extra mug until the coffee grew cold. The emptiness was a physical ache, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I sold our house, unable to bear the ghosts. Amanda suggested I stay with her and Chad until I got back on my feet. I was grateful then. I didn't recognize the reluctance in Chad's eyes when I arrived with my 2 suitcases, all that remained of my life. I tried to be invisible in their apartment. I kept to my small back room, cooked meals, washed dishes, ran errands, anything to feel useful. But Chad's irritation was palpable. He would roll his eyes when I spoke, change the TV channel mid-show, mutter comments under his breath as he passed me in the hallway. "Freeloader," I heard him say once, pretending not to hear. I looked to Amanda, my daughter, for support. She only offered excuses. "He's stressed," she'd say. "Work's been rough." I swallowed my pride and stayed quiet. That night, the night everything changed, I had made chicken pot pie, Chad's favorite. I thought perhaps the gesture might ease the tension. We sat at the dinner table, Amanda scrolling through her phone, Chad sipping his beer. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. Then Chad looked up and said, "Maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity." I stared at him, my fork suspended midway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" he smirked. "I mean, how long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned to Amanda, desperate for her to defend me. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake. For everyone's sake." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I stood up, walked to my room, and packed my 2 suitcases. Through the thin walls, I could hear them whispering, Chad's voice dominant, Amanda's submissive. I had raised a daughter who couldn't stand up to her husband, who would choose his comfort over her mother's welfare. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't even pretend to care. I stood outside their building, the wind cutting through my coat, with nowhere to go. My phone battery was dead. My heart felt the same. I sat on the curb for an hour, watching lights turn on and off in strangers' windows, wondering if anyone else had ever felt so thoroughly erased. That night, I checked into a motel, the kind where the wallpaper peels and the vending machine steals your quarters. I lay on sheets that smelled of industrial detergent, staring at water stains on the ceiling, and thought about all the birthdays I had celebrated with Amanda, all the fevers I had nursed, all the nightmares I had soothed. The next morning, I texted her, "I understand. I love you always." No reply. 3 months passed in that motel room. I sent messages, updates, birthday wishes, simple heart emojis. The silence from Amanda was deafening. I tried applying for jobs, but who wants to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work history? My savings dwindled. Some nights, I would count coins to afford dinner. Other nights, I simply went to bed hungry, too exhausted to care. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the fear. It was the shame. I had given everything to my daughter. How could she discard me so easily? One evening, as I sorted through a box of keepsakes, trying to feel connected to something, anything, I found my mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, maybe never. But something drew me to it that night. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and opened its worn leather cover. My mother's handwriting was precise, familiar, the same loops and curves that had adorned my childhood lunch notes. The early entries were mundane: weather reports, church activities, complaints about rising grocery prices. But then I found an entry from June, decades ago. He came again today. Said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Margaret will never know. She must never know. I just pray one day she understands how much I loved her, even if she was born out of mistake and desire. My breath caught. I read the passage again, then again. She must never know. I flipped through more pages, finding scattered references to hotel meetings, small cash payments, a man identified only by initials, HJS. Then another entry from February. He said he'd made arrangements that if anything ever happened to him, he'd ensure Margaret had something, a part of what he built. It won't be official, of course. It's too dangerous. But he promised me a trust, a letter. He said his lawyer, Mr. Goldstein, would know. Goldstein. The name struck a chord. After 2 days of searching online, at the motel's shared computer, I found him, Leonard Goldstein, a retired estate lawyer still listed with a private firm in Dallas. I sent him a letter explaining who I was, mentioning my mother, and requesting a meeting. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Mr. Goldstein's voice cracked when I mentioned my mother's name. "I always wondered if you'd reach out someday," he said. "There's something you need to see." I took a Greyhound to Dallas the next morning. In his quiet office, surrounded by leather-bound law books, Mr. Goldstein handed me a yellowed envelope. It was from Harold James Sterling, founder of Sterling Energy, one of the biggest oil firms in Texas. A man I'd seen in newspaper clippings all my life. A man with a family, a reputation, a legacy. The letter was addressed to my daughter, Margaret Louise. I couldn't read it all at once. Tears blurred my vision after the first paragraph. Harold Sterling admitted everything: the affair with my mother, his regret, his silent love, and his promise. In the event of my death, I have insured a portion of my personal assets, untraceable through my estate, are to be delivered to you via Mr. Goldstein. You are my blood, and though I was too much a coward to claim you in life, I claim you now in death. Mr. Goldstein slid a folder across his desk. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, property titles. The total value, just over $1 million. This is real? I whispered. He nodded. It's yours. Always was. I didn't scream or laugh or break down. I sat there quietly, letting the truth wash over me. For the first time in my life, I felt chosen, seen. That night in my motel room, I stared at the ceiling, a smile creeping onto my face. They thought they had discarded me. They thought I was finished. They had no idea I was just getting started. I stayed in Dallas for several days, processing what I'd learned. I wasn't just Margaret, the forgotten mother. I was someone with a past I never knew, a future I couldn't have imagined. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in shame. I was breathing in possibility. When I returned to Austin, I didn't go back to the motel. I booked a sleek short-term rental downtown, the kind of place Amanda and Chad would never imagine me affording. I began dressing differently and not flashy, but polished, deliberate. I became invisible in a new way, the kind of invisible that gets you through doors. I started watching investment tutorials, reading about real estate, learning the language of business. Not because I wanted to build an empire, but because I would never be powerless again. That's when I found it, a listing buried on a real estate auction site for a small apartment building in East Austin. The exact complex where Amanda and Chad lived. The property was distressed, with the owner defaulting on taxes. Auction scheduled in 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Goldstein's help, I created an LLC, an anonymous shell company. I filed the paperwork, transferred the funds, and placed the bid. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. But I was going to take control of the one place they thought they ruled. I won the auction quietly, legally, entirely under the radar. And just like that, I owned the building where they lived, where they had kicked me out with 2 suitcases and hollow excuses, where they had humiliated me in my lowest moment. Let's see how Chad likes paying rent to a mouth he couldn't feed, I whispered to myself. A month later, notification letters went out to all tenants. Rents would be reassessed, lease terms reviewed. And for Chad and Amanda, the new amount was triple, not double, triple the previous rate. I imagined Chad's reaction when he opened that letter. I didn't need to see it to know. I could feel his rage from miles away. Not because of the money, but because of his pride. Chad was a man who needed to feel in control, and I had just pulled the rug out from under him silently. 2 days after the notices went out, Amanda called me for the first time since I'd left. "Mom," her voicemail said, "I don't know if you heard, but something weird's going on. Our rent just shot up like crazy. Chad's losing it. I don't know. Can we talk?" I didn't respond. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about gravity. They needed to feel the weight of their choices. I drove by their building once, late at night. Their lights were on. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains, Amanda pacing, Chad gesturing wildly. I watched them for a minute, then drove away. Part of me felt hollow, part vindicated, and part still hurt like hell. Because even now, knowing what I knew, holding what I held, I would have given anything to be invited back, not into their apartment, but into my daughter's heart. But I knew that wasn't possible. Not yet. So I stayed silent and waited, because sometimes the loudest justice is the one that doesn't say a word. I was surprised by how much I had changed until I saw Amanda at the grocery store 3 weeks later. She didn't see me. I was 2 aisles over, hidden behind a rack of discounted cereal. She looked tired, not just tired. but worn down. Her hair was tied back sloppily, the way she used to do when she'd been crying. Her cart was half empty, mostly cheap staples, rice, eggs, a few off-brand cans. I should have walked away. I didn't. I followed her through the store at a distance, heart pounding. She paused in front of a small box of mac and cheese, then looked down at her phone, a text from Chad, perhaps. Her shoulders sank. She put the box back. That moment broke something in me. Not because I pitied her, but because I remembered the little girl who used to run to me crying when she scraped her knee. The one who asked me every night to check for monsters under her bed. And now she was living with one. I started implementing small repairs around the building, fixing leaks, replacing broken locks, updating flickering hallway lights. Chad never noticed. He was too busy firing off angry emails to the property manager, demanding answers about the rent increase. I knew him well enough to predict his behavior. He wouldn't move that would feel like defeat. And Amanda would follow his lead, as she always did. So I continued my quiet chess match. I changed the property signage, installed security cameras, updated the mailboxes, all under the name of my company, ML Holdings, short for Margaret Louise. No one knew who was behind it. No one except me. Then came the notice. Annual inspections, mandatory for all units. Chad sent a furious response through the tenant portal, filled with empty threats and self-righteous indignation. I smiled reading it. He was unraveling, and I didn't need to lift a finger. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone I barely recognized. I wore my hair differently, chose sharper clothes, walked with purpose. I joined small business meetups under a pseudonym, building connections in real estate. No one asked about my past. They only saw a quiet, composed woman with sharp eyes and cash on hand. The best disguise is the truth you don't tell. One morning, I passed Amanda and Chad in the parking lot as I exited a tenant meeting. I kept my sunglasses on, my hair tucked into a sleek bun, documents in hand. Amanda barely glanced at me. Chad didn't recognize me at all. Later that night, I sat in my living room sipping tea, thinking about how strange it felt to walk right past your own child and be invisible, not because you're weak, but because you're stronger than they remember. The calls from Amanda continued. Soft, hesitant voicemails. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to see if maybe you had time to talk. I know things have been complicated. I didn't return them, not out of cruelty, but because she needed to feel the void she had created. And whenever doubt crept in, I opened my mother's diary and read those words. Margaret will never know. She must never know. But I did know now, and with that knowledge came a kind of armor no one could penetrate. I was no longer the woman begging to stay under their roof. I was the woman who owned it. The building management team kept me informed about all tenants, including Chad and Amanda. Their apartment was showing signs of neglect, mildew in the bathroom, cracked kitchen tiles, mail piling up on the floor. They were cutting corners, living lean. Word around the building was that Chad had started taking on extra hours at work. Amanda was seen crying on the back steps one afternoon. They were unraveling from the inside out, and I didn't have to say a single word. That was the part I kept coming back to. For so long, I had been the one begging to be heard, begging Amanda to see what Chad was, to see what she was becoming by standing beside him. Now they were choking on their own silence, and I was watching from above, literally. My new apartment overlooked their courtyard, different building, higher floor, better neighborhood, a view they could never afford. I didn't watch them all the time. Just enough to remember that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the betrayal, that what they did deserved consequences. And yet, despite everything, some nights I still found myself sitting by the window, holding my phone, staring at Amanda's last message. I really need you. The mother in me ached. But the woman I had become knew this was only the beginning. One afternoon, I received a report after a noise complaint. The neighbor downstairs had heard a heated argument, shouting about losing control, and this is all your fault. Chad had stormed out and didn't return until the next morning. Amanda stayed locked inside their apartment all night. Lights off, curtains closed. I waited. Not for Chad, but for her. It took 2 more days. Then, just as the sun was setting, my building's intercom buzzed. Hi, this is Amanda Harmon. I was wondering if Margaret, my mom lives here. My heart stopped. I didn't answer right away. I just watched the security screen, frozen. Then slowly, I pressed the door release. 10 minutes later, a soft knock echoed at my apartment door. When I opened it, Amanda stood there looking like a shadow of the girl I raised a pale, makeup smudged, wrinkles in her shirt. She looked 20 years older than she was. We stared at each other for a long time. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she let out a breath. Hi, Mom. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor. I handed her a towel and moved to the kitchen. The room was silent except for the clink of teacups as I prepared 2 mugs of chamomile tea. I didn't ask why she was there. I didn't ask how she was. I just handed her the tea, sat down across from her, and waited. I don't know where to start, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing. She looked down. Chad's not. He's not easy. He's angry all the time. Blames the rent. Blames me. Blames the dog next door, for God's sake. Still, I stayed silent. I thought I was doing the right thing. Back then, when we asked you to leave, asked as if I gave you a choice. She paused. I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want more conflict. Chad said. He said you'd never leave unless we pushed you. And I. Her voice broke. God, I hate myself for agreeing. I took a sip of tea. I miss you, she whispered. But I don't know how to fix it. I studied her face, every line, every flinch. She was looking for forgiveness, but afraid to ask for it. So I gave her the only thing I could, silence. Because sometimes silence is safer than the truth. We sat like that for nearly an hour. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for help. She just wanted to be near me, and I let her. When she finally stood to leave, she reached for my hand. I'm sorry, she said, for everything. I didn't say it back. I just held her hand a little longer than she expected. She pulled away first, and then, with tears welling in her eyes, walked out the door. I didn't cry. But the second the door clicked shut, I sank into my chair, holding her teacup in my palms like a lifeline. She had come. She had looked me in the eye. And now I knew the cracks were finally starting to show. Amanda visited again a few days later. This time, she brought a grocery bag clutched to her chest like it was keeping her upright. Her eyes were red, her clothes rumpled. I let her in without a word. He's not who I thought he was, she said finally, staring into her cup of tea. I knew part of me always knew. But I told myself it was stress, that he just needed support, that if I was patient, he'd come around. I stayed quiet. He thinks someone's targeting us. He's obsessed. He's been going through my phone, my emails. Her voice trembled. Last week, he followed me to work, said he was making sure I wasn't involved. A shiver ran through her body. He asked if I was hiding something, if you were hiding something. That caught my breath. She didn't wait for an answer. I told him I hadn't spoken to you in weeks, that I didn't even know where you were. She paused. But that was a lie. I met her eyes for the first time. I found your building listed in a security notice. Same management company. I figured it out. It wasn't hard. Of course it wasn't. Amanda was smart. Always had been. But smart doesn't always mean brave. And now she looked like someone who had finally opened her eyes and hated what she saw. I miss you, she whispered. But I don't even know how to be around you anymore. My hand tightened around my mug. You left, she said, voice cracking. And I let you. I let him push you out. Finally, I spoke. No, Amanda. You didn't let him. You stood with him. That stopped her cold. She blinked, lips parting slightly like she wanted to deny it, to defend herself. But there was nothing left to defend. I stood up and walked to the window. I begged for your voice that night. Just one word. Just one. And you stayed silent. Behind me, I heard her exhale a quiet, broken sound. I didn't think it would get this bad, she said. I thought I could manage him. You can't manage a man like that, I said softly. You survive him, or you leave him. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. We sat in silence for a long time, two women who shared blood, but not trust. Not yet. Maybe never. When she finally stood to leave, she set her mug down carefully, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to remember what it felt like to be safe. I walked her to the door. She paused, then turned back suddenly and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't return the hug at first. Then I did, but gently, cautiously, like someone trying to hold a memory without letting it slip away. When she pulled back, she didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me one last time and left. I began to plan the next move in my quiet chess match. Invitations went out on a Tuesday morning, a mandatory meeting to discuss upcoming building renovations, scheduled in the common room the following week. I knew Chad would be there. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist. He wanted a name, a face, someone to blame. He had no idea he would be walking right into the hands of the woman he had discarded like a broken appliance. The day of the meeting, I arrived early. I wore a charcoal gray blazer and dark jeans, simple, elegant, unrecognizable. My hair, now in soft waves, brushed my shoulders. I looked nothing like the woman who had once begged for a sliver of dignity at Amanda's kitchen table. The common room filled slowly. Tenants trickled in, some curious, others annoyed, most indifferent. And then came Chet. He stormed in with the swagger of a man expecting confrontation, Amanda trailing behind him like a shadow. He didn't look around, didn't notice me. He only saw the property manager at the front and went straight to him. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I want to speak to the person in charge today." The manager remained calm. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Chad scoffed. Amanda looked down at her shoes. I sat near the back, silent. The presentation began routine announcements, upgrades, timelines, the new security system, the updated landscaping, improved insulation. Practical changes, smart decisions, all funded in part by the very rent Chad had so bitterly protested. Then the manager paused. "We'd like to thank ML Holdings for their commitment to revitalizing the property and prioritizing tenant comfort. The owner is here today, should anyone have questions. I stood up. The room turned. I walked slowly toward the front, calm and steady. Every step, a quiet drumbeat in my chest. Chad's face twisted in confusion, then disbelief. Amanda's mouth parted in shock. I turned to the room. Good evening. My name is Margaret. I'm the owner of this building. You could hear a pin drop. Chad stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You? This is a joke. What kind of game is this? I really looked at him, and saw the cracks he had tried to hide. The sweat behind his collar. The puffiness under his eyes. The panic. No game, I said softly. Just business. He took a step forward. You manipulated this. You've been behind this the whole time. You raised our rent. You're trying to ruin us. I held my ground. I gave you a roof. I made improvements. I treated every tenant equally. What I didn't do was forget. He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned back to the group. If anyone has questions about the changes or improvements, I'm happy to answer them after the meeting. Thank you. I stepped aside. The meeting resumed, but the tension never left the air. Chad didn't sit down. He just stood there, trembling with fury. Amanda sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes wide and wet. When the meeting ended, tenants came to me, shaking hands, asking questions, thanking me. Some had suspected. Most had no idea. Chad waited until the room emptied. Then he marched toward me. You think you've won? He hissed. But this is nothing. You've made an enemy. I stared at him, eyes level. No, Chad. I didn't make anything. You did. The day you looked me in the eye and treated me like I didn't matter. Amanda stepped between us. Chad, stop. He turned to her, shocked. What did you just? I said stop. She repeated, louder this time. She's not your enemy. She never was. You are. He looked at her like she'd struck him. And in a way, she had. Amanda turned to me, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I swear about the building, the money, any of it. I nodded. I know. Why didn't you tell me? Because you had to see it, not just hear it. She blinked back tears. Chad scoffed, stepping back. You two deserve each other. No, I said quietly. She deserves better. Then I turned and walked away. And for the first time since that awful night in their kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but power. Quiet, firm, and entirely mine. Amanda showed up at my door 4 days later. This time holding something that made my knees buckle the second I saw it, a book, faded leather, corner torn, spine barely holding together. My mother's diary. I opened the door without a word. She stepped in, eyes wide, breath shaky. I found it in my closet, she said. The last time I visited you, you must have left it behind. She placed it on the coffee table like it was sacred. And for me, it was. I read it. My heart stopped. I wasn't trying to pry, she rushed, but I recognized Grandma's handwriting. I was looking for something that made sense. Silence fell between us, heavy and still. I didn't know about Harold Sterling, she whispered. Or the money, or the trust, or any of it. I nodded once, slowly. I didn't know either. Not until I had nothing else to lose. Her voice broke. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were helpless? I looked her in the eye, and for once, she didn't look away. Because I was helpless. The night you closed the door on me, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have money. I didn't even have a place to cry where someone wouldn't knock and tell me to keep it down. Amanda winced. I found the diary at my lowest point, when I was counting coins to eat dinner, when I hadn't spoken to anyone in a week. That diary, it didn't just tell me who I was. It reminded me that I mattered, that my mother didn't just love me. She fought for me silently, without ever being able to show it. Amanda sat down, hands clenched in her lap. I don't know how I became the kind of daughter who could do what I did. I keep asking myself that, over and over. I walked to the window, stared out at the street below, the quiet hum of life passing by. You didn't become her all at once, I said. It was small choices, letting things slide, choosing peace over truth, believing love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. She stood and walked toward me. I've left him. The words hit the air like a bomb. He tried to go through my things again. My laptop, my bag. I told him no. That was it. He screamed, packed a bag, and left. Said he'd be back. I changed the locks the next day. I turned to her, stunned. I don't know who I am without him, she admitted, voice trembling. But I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. A silence passed between us, thick with everything we hadn't said. Then she looked down at the diary. You didn't deserve what we did. I can't fix that, but I want to try. I walked back to her slowly, sat down beside her. I used to dream about hearing those words, I said. But when you say them now, they don't fix the past. They rewrite it. She looked at me, confused. I held her hand gently. You see me now. That changes everything. We sat there together for a long time. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt, but heals. The kind that comes after truth has finally had its say. Before Amanda left that night, she paused at the door. You didn't raise me to be weak, she said. I just forgot how strong you were. I smiled softly. No, I said. You didn't forget. You just stopped looking. And now she was seeing everything. Not just who I had become, but who I'd always been. In the weeks that followed, Amanda moved out of the apartment into a small studio near her job. She started therapy, joined a community art class. She even painted something for me, an abstract of a phoenix in dark reds and golds. I hung it above my fireplace. We talked more often now, not every day, but when we did, it was real, honest. No more pretending. Chad disappeared from our lives without a dramatic ending, just silence. He moved to a new city, a new job, probably weaving new lies to hide his insecurities. Before he left, he signed a non-disclosure agreement and dropped his threats. The last thing he wanted was another legal battle, or worse, for the world to see the truth about who he really was. I sold the building that spring. The final paperwork was signed on a bright, cloudless Tuesday. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet click of a pen, a firm handshake, and the weight of months of grief, betrayal, and silence finally lifting from my shoulders. Half of the proceeds went to a local shelter for women and children in crisis, the kind of place I wish I had known existed the night I stood on that curb with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. I asked them to name a wing after my mother, the Eleanor House, honoring the woman who gave me strength in silence. The other half I used to buy a small house in Cedar Park, on the same street where I grew up. Oak trees out front, a porch swing, enough space for quiet, for healing, for growing tomatoes if I ever felt like trying. The day I moved in, Amanda helped carry boxes. She didn't say much. Neither did I, but after we finished unpacking, she sat beside me on the porch swing, legs tucked under her, eyes scanning the street. "I remember riding my bike here," she said softly, "before everything got complicated." I nodded. "You were always safe here." "I forgot how that felt," she whispered. That night, after she left, I stood at the window holding a cup of tea in both hands, watching moonlight stretch across the front lawn. And for the first time in a long, long time, I said the words out loud. "I forgive you." Not to Amanda, to myself. Because that was the hardest part. Not rising from the ashes, but learning that I was never the fire they tried to extinguish. I was the spark they underestimated. They taught me that silence was weakness, but I learned how to weaponize it. They tried to erase me, and I became someone they could never forget. I sat down on the couch, opened the diary one last time, and tucked a note inside for Amanda to find someday. You don't need their love to be worthy. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need the truth and to never, ever forget who you are. The clock ticked softly in the background. My tea grew cold in my hands, but my heart, it was finally warm. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to win. I just needed to be who I was all along. And now, finally, I was home.